Okay, so the brain. Okay. Now with the nervous system, I think in our previous meeting we were looking at the spinal cord. Okay. Good. The spinal cord, we looked at the internal anatomy of the spinal cord or the cross section. Okay, this is the transverse cross section of the spinal cord. This is how it looks like. Okay, and I think we went through the cross section of the spinal cord. Okay, so when we ask you of the cross section of the spinal cord, this is what we mean. Okay, so in the cross section, we have the dorsal medial sulcus. We looked at the gray commissure. So over here, where I'm pointing is the gray commissure. And then we have the dorsal horn. Then we have the lateral horn. So this part is the lateral horn. So the dorsal horn, the lateral horn, the ventral horn, they form the gray matter. Is that okay? Great. Then we have the funiculus. So the funiculus forms the white matter. And remember I told you for the spinal cord, the white matter is rather outside. And the gray matter is central. It's in the middle. Okay, that's for the spinal cord. Okay, so the funiculus. So we have the dorsal funiculus, the lateral funiculus, and the ventral funiculus. They together forms the white matter or the white column. Okay, then over here we have the ventral medial fissure. So you can see a fissure over here. A fissure is more like a depression. It's like a demarcation, a line of demarcation. So at the anterior part of the cross section, we have the ventral median fissure. Then if you go to the posterior parts, we have the dorsal median sulcus. Is that okay? The dorsal median sulcus. So over here too, there is a demarcation over here. But the one at the posterior side, we call it the sulcus. So the dorsal median sulcus. Okay, good. Then we have the layers around the spinal cord. So the layers, the innermost layer, we have the pia mater. From the pia mater, we have the arachnoid mater. From the arachnoid mater, we have the dura mater or the spinal dura mater. Okay. Then we have the dorsal roots. Okay, we have the dorsal roots. These are nerves. So we have the dorsal roots, and the one in front, we call it the ventral roots. Then we have the dorsal root ganglion over here, and then we have the spinal nerve. If you come over here to this is the spinal nerve. This one is the spinal nerve. The one I'm pointing now is the spinal nerve. Okay, so this is the spinal nerve. This is also the dorsal root ganglion. This is the ventral roots. This one is the ventral roots, and then over here is the dorsal root. Okay, great. And we can give you this diagram in an exams to label the parts, or we can ask you to draw the cross section, the internal cross section of the spinal cord, and label the parts as well. Okay, so it's something you have to learn how to draw. Is that okay? Yes. So you have to learn how to practice how to draw it, and also master how to label all the parts. Okay, because it's an examinable area in the nervous system. Okay, if we want to examine you anything in the nervous system, this is one of the diagrams we can examine you on, in addition to the diagram of the neuron. So remember. All right, that is fine. So that is the yes. So this is this. So in exams, this is how we can present it. Okay, so we can present it this way. Then you will be the one to label the parts. Is that okay? Great. And I think we've done the structures in the spinal cord. These are the spinal nerves. Okay, the divisions of the spinal cord. Okay, good. So quickly, let's go to, and I think we've done the meninges, the membrane surrounding the brain and the spinal cord. So the innermost region is the dura mater. Is that okay? The dura mater. Sorry, the outermost layer is the dura mater. And I think I explained the meaning of the word dura, meaning strong. Is that okay? And that layer is made up of a fibrous outer layer, fibrous tissue. Okay, the strongest layer. Okay, then we have the arachnoid matter. Okay, the arachnoid matter, which is the middle layer. Then we have the pia matter. Okay, and the pia matter is very soft and thin. Okay, great. So basically, these are the membranes surrounding the brain, or the layers around the brain and the spinal cord. Now, the meninges, basically, they are responsible for protection. Okay, so they protect the brain and the spinal cord. So when you hear meninges, we are talking about the membrane surrounding the brain and the spinal cord. And that membrane is made up of 3 layers. Okay, the pia matter, the arachnoid matter, and the dura matter. Is that okay? Great. The space, what's the name given to the space between the pia matter and arachnoid matter?
Subarachnoid space.
Good. Subarachnoid space. All right. And what is the name given to the space between the arachnoid matter and then the dura matter?
Subdural space.
Good. Subdural space. Yes, subdural space. And where do we have the cerebrospinal fluid?
Subarachnoid space.
Good. All right. That is fine. So all these are anatomical things that you have to know. Okay. Good. And again, the cerebrospinal fluid. The cerebrospinal fluid is a clear, colorless liquid that surrounds the subarachnoid space. That is within the subarachnoid space. So it's more like a fluid surrounding the brain and the spinal cord. And the key function of this fluid is that it acts as a mechanical cushion. And it also transports nutrients. It's a nutrient transporter, okay, to the brain and spinal cord. And it also helps with waste removal. Is that okay? In the brain and spinal cord. And you can be asked this in physiology, the functions of cerebrospinal. It's something you have to know, not only for physiology, even in medicine, okay, and also in surgery. It's something important that you have to know. The importance of, or the functions of cerebrospinal fluid, okay, for the purpose of mechanical cushioning, that is protection, okay, and it also helps with nutrient transport to the brain and spinal cord, okay, and the next is that it helps with waste removal. These are the functions of the cerebrospinal fluid. Is that okay? Now, the total volume is also something you should know. The total volume of cerebrospinal fluid is about 150 mL. Is that okay? Great. It's about 150 mL at any given time. Okay, so the 150 mL, we have about 125 mL always in the subarachnoid space, and the remaining 25 mL is always in the ventricles of the brain. Okay, so but know this, that the total volume of cerebrospinal fluid is 150. But the 150, we always have about 125 mL always in the subarachnoid space. Then the other brain ventricles, we have the remaining 25 mL there. Is that okay? Great. Then, so know the key points with the cerebrospinal fluid. At least know the functions. Okay, know the functions and also know the total volume. Those are the key things that we are interested in. And again, more importantly, for your pharmacology and for your medicine and surgery, know the composition of the cerebrospinal fluid. Okay, so for the composition, it's made up of water, electrolytes, glucose, proteins, and few white blood cells. Okay, when we say composition is more like what forms the cerebrospinal fluid. What is forming it? Is that okay? So what forms the cerebrospinal fluid is water, electrolytes like sodium, potassium, chloride, magnesium, calcium, and then glucose, proteins, and few white blood cells. And we can ask you this in exams. The composition of the cerebrospinal fluid is examinable. So you should know, we can just ask you to state all the compositions of the cerebrospinal fluid. Okay, so it's made up of water, electrolytes, glucose, proteins, and white blood cells. Is that okay? So yes, so and in the medicine class, it's something that is discussed a lot, especially when you are doing nervous system conditions. It's something that is usually discussed in medicine classes. Okay, so the composition of cerebrospinal fluid. It is made up of water, electrolytes, glucose, proteins, and white blood cells. Okay, good. Now let's go straight and look at the brain. So with the brain, I'll just highlight on some key, very relevant areas that you need to know about the brain. Then quickly, we would close the chapter on the nervous system. And then we start with the endocrine system. Okay, now the brain. So let me quickly show you a diagram of the brain. This is how the brain looks like. Okay, so this is how the human brain looks like. Okay, this is a diagram of the human brain. Is that okay? This is a diagram of the human brain. Okay, so I have two diagrams here for you. Okay, you can see that it's divided into, it's more like it's being divided into two. Later on, I'll explain what all that means in anatomy. Okay, so typically for a human brain, this is how it looks like. Okay, now the brain is more like an oval shaped organ with two hemispheres. So you see, there are two hemispheres. You see, it's divided into two. We have two hemispheres. Okay, we have two hemispheres. So the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere of the brain. Okay, now if you take an average adult, okay, the brain weighs about 1,600 grams in men. Okay, and for women, it weighs about 1,450 grams in women. Is that okay? Great. So that is the weight of the brain. So approximately you can say 1,600 grams. Okay, so that's the weight of the brain. 1,600 grams in men and about 1,450 grams in women. Okay, that's the weight of the brain. Now the brain has three major divisions. Okay, now the three major divisions, we have the cerebrum, the cerebellum, the brain stem, which is made up of the diencephalon, the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla. Okay, now if you know nothing at all about the brain, these major divisions, there is something you have to know. Okay, so when we take a human brain, it's typically made up of these three major divisions. So the cerebrum is more like the largest portion of the brain. So let's go to the diagram. So you see this portion of the brain, the parts that I'm circling around with the mouse cursor. This portion is what we call the cerebrum. The cerebrum. Okay, it's over here, so you can check it out over here. So these are the main divisions of the brain. So look at it: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and then the brain stem. Okay, so we have the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and then the brain stem. So in fact, if you know nothing about the brain, when we ask you the main parts of the brain, at least you should know. Okay, so the main part of the brain, we have the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brain stem. Is that okay? Good. Now, the cerebrum, in some literatures, you can also call it the teleencephalon. I want you to say this after me. Say teleencephalon. Say teleencephalon.
Teleencephalon.
Good. Good. Or you can say telencephalon. Okay. Either you say teleencephalon or telencephalon. That is another name for the cerebrum. So remember. Okay, so in some textbooks, you may be reading some textbook, you see the written telencephalon. It's the same as the cerebrum. So when they say telencephalon, they are talking about the cerebrum. Is that okay? Good. So the main parts of the brain, we have the cerebrum, the brain stem, and then we have the cerebellum. These are the main parts of the brain. So you see, so over here too in this diagram, this is the cerebellum. This one is the cerebellum. This one, the cerebellum. Okay, and then this one is the cerebrum. So you can see clearly that which part is the largest? The three parts, which part is the largest?
The cerebrum.
Yes, which part is the largest?
The cerebrum.
Good. Yes, that is the largest portion. Is that okay? That's the largest portion. Okay, so let me show you another image over here. Good. So over here too, so you see there's the cerebrum. So you see the largest portion. So from this side, the demarcation that I'm going around, that's the cerebrum. That's the largest part of the brain. And here is the cerebellum. Okay, we have the cerebellum. Is that okay? Then we have the brain stem. The brain stem, we have the brain stem made up of the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla. So the brain stem is made up of the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla. So typically for a human brain, it's made up of three main parts. Okay, so the three main parts, we have the cerebrum. You can also call it the telencephalon, or you can call it the upper brain. Okay, then we have the brain stem, then we have the cerebellum. Is that okay? So we have the cerebrum, which is the largest part, or you can call it the upper brain. We have the brain stem, and then we have the cerebellum. Let's look at it from another diagram. Diagram too. Okay. So look at this diagram too. So you see this diagram. This diagram, we have the parts of the brain. So you see we have the telencephalon. That's the cerebrum. Is that okay? So the telencephalon. Which one is this one? Which one is this? Which one is this? The one I'm pointing.
The cerebrum.
Good. The cerebellum. Is that okay? The cerebellum. Okay. The cerebellum. Okay. Then we have the diencephalon. Okay. The diencephalon. We have the pons. Okay. We have the midbrain is also here. We have the pons, and then we have the medulla. Okay, the medulla is also called the myencephalon. Okay, great. Then we have the pons. The pons, you can also call it the mesencephalon. Okay, sorry, the metaencephalon. Then we have the hindbrain, which we also call the mesencephalon. Okay, so it's the same as this diagram, just that you have to know the midbrain is also called the mesencephalon. So you see it's over here. Okay, so when we say mesencephalon, we are looking at the midbrain here. So you know the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla, they form the brain stem. So this is the brain stem. The one I'm going around, this one is what we call the brain stem. Look at it over here. Here, this one. This is what we call the brain stem. The brain stem. Over here is the same here. This is what we call the brain stem. The brain stem. So the brain stem, when we say brain stem is made up of, we have the midbrain, we have the pons, and then we have the medulla. So there's the midbrain, there's the pons, and there's the medulla. And I mentioned that the midbrain, we also call it the mesencephalon. Okay. Then the pons, you can also call it the metencephalon. The metencephalon. Then the medulla, you can also call it the myencephalon. Okay, those are other names that you have to know. And then the cerebrum, you can also call the cerebrum telencephalon. Okay, or telencephalon. So let's go back to the main divisions. So what are the three main divisions of the brain?
The
cerebellum,
cerebellum and
cerebellum,
cerebellum and brainstem.
brainstem.
Good. Good. Excellent. So we are taking it one after the other. There are key things that you need to know about the brain. Okay. Very important things that you need to know about the brain. And that is what I'll make sure you get. Good. So there's the largest part. So you can see clearly from the diagram that the largest part of the brain is the cerebrum. Okay. What's another name for the cerebrum?
Upper brain
Upper brain or
or
Telencephalon.
good, or telencephalon. Telencephalon. You need to learn to use the other names. Is that okay? Because usually most of you already know the cerebrum, but you have to learn to know the other names, the upper brain or the telencephalon. Is that okay? Good. So that's the main part of the brain. Okay, then we have the brain stem. What form the brain stem? What are the divisions of the brain stem?
The midbrain,
The
pons,
midbrain.
and
Mm-hmm.
the medulla oblongata.
Good. So let me go back to let me take you to the diagram and show you again those who are not concentrating. So when we say brain stem, this is the brain stem. This is what we call the brain stem. This one is what we call the brain stem. This is what we call the brain stem. So you see the entire brain, if you are looking at it composite, it's like three parts. So you see the largest part, this is the largest part. And the largest part is what we are calling the cerebrum. And then this part is what we refer to as, so this part, all this part is what we call the brain stem. This part, that's what we call the brain stem. So from here, coming down to this part, that's what we call the brain stem. Is that okay? So that's what we are talking about. So that's the brain. If you want to look at it from here to, this is what we call the brain stem. Okay, let me see. I think I was having another. So, okay, so it's the same thing. So this part is what we call the brain stem. So look, this one, the structure inside. So from here coming down, so the one I'm going around, the structure that I'm going around. Is that okay? The structure that I'm going around, that is what we call the brain stem. So what is forming the brain stem? Look at it very well. Look at the structure I'm going around. What is forming the brain stem? What is forming the brain stem?
the medulla,
The,
the midbrain, and then the pons.
midbrain, the pons, and the
Good.
medulla.
Good. But remember, the diencephalon is part of the brain stem. Okay. The diencephalon is part of the brain stem. So the diencephalon, okay. The diencephalon in anatomy, the diencephalon. Oh, who are we getting the background from? In anatomy, the diencephalon, we also call it the interbrain. Say interbrain. Say it. Say
Interbrain.
interbrain. Good. Interbrain.
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 That's another name for the diencephalon. Is that okay? This one. You see, right from the interbrain, you are going to the cerebrum. So it's like the reason why we call it interbrain is because you see, it's considered in between the cerebrum and the brain stem, but it's
Yeah.
part of the brain stem. Is that okay? So
Yes,
that's why we
sir.
call it interbrain. So the diencephalon, you can also call it the interbrain. From the interbrain, then we come to the midbrain. What is another name for the midbrain? I mentioned another name for the midbrain. Who remembers? Another name for the midbrain. Yes, what's another name for the midbrain?
Mesencephalon.
Mesencephalon. Write all these names down because you need to know the other names. So the mesencephalon, that is another name for the midbrain. Okay, how about the pons? Another name for the pons.
Metal encephalon.
Mesencephalon.
Come again.
You said metal
Metencephalon.
encephalo or
It's met encephalon.
met encephalon.
Say it again. Say met encephalon.
Met
Metencephalon.
encephalon.
Good. Met encephalon. So now then we have the medulla oblongata. In some books they call it the medulla. It's the same. So in some books you see they've written medulla oblongata. In some books too they've written medulla. It's the same. So what is another name for the medulla?
Myencephalon.
Good.
Myencephalon.
My encephalon. So if you go and open a textbook, different place, and you see they've written my encephalon, don't say you didn't learn. Oh. It's the same thing. And so some books you see them using here they will write my encephalon. So you see, it's the my encephalon that will go and connect to the spinal cord. You know the brain connects to the spinal cord. Oh. So it's the brain stem, but specifically the myencephalon that will go and connect, or the medulla of the brain that will go and connect to the spinal cord. Is that so? And it's something very important in anatomy for MCQ. We can ask you which part of the brain connects directly to the spinal cord. Then the answer can either be medulla oblongata or it can be the myencephalon. Is that okay? It's something that you should know. So typically, what forms the brain stem? Yes, what forms the brain stem?
The
Diencephalon.
The diencephalon or
Midbrain or interbrain.
the interbrain, and then what else?
The myencephalon.
Midbrain.
the midbrain.
Midbrain or
Mesencephalon.
the mesencephalon, and then what else?
Pons.
The pons or
Mesencephalon.
the mesencephalon, and then the last one is what?
The medulla oblongata.
The medulla oblongata or
Myencephalon.
the myencephalon. Which part of the brain stem connects to the spinal cord?
The
medulla.
Yes. So in a question like that, the answer you should be expecting to see either myencephalon or the medulla oblongata. Now, in fact, once you know these three things, you are done with the brain. Oh. At least, if you're able to know that, okay, the brain is made up of three major parts: the cerebrum, which we also call the tail encephalon or the upper brain. Then we have the cerebellum. Okay. Then we have what we call the brain stem. Then you know that the brain stem is further divided into four. We have the diencephalon, which we also call the interbrain. We have the midbrain, which we also call the mesencephalon. We have the pons, which we also call the metencephalon. And then we have the medulla oblongata, which we also call the myencephalon. And it's the myencephalon that eventually connects to the spinal cord. Once you know this, at least it's okay. Okay, if you don't know anything about the brain, at least these three major divisions you should know. Is that okay? Then you should also know which part of the brain is the largest. What is the largest division of the brain?
The cerebrum.
Good. Yes, the cerebrum. That is the largest division. That's the largest division of the brain, the cerebrum. Okay, so you see, this is the cerebrum. This is how the cerebrum look like. So this one is the cerebrum. This one is the cerebrum. So you see the cerebrum. And can you see that it's like there are some line of depression in the cerebrum? In the cerebrum, can you see there are some line of depression? It's like some lines. Realistically, let me go to the brain diagram itself. Can you see the depressions? It's like some depressions inside the brain. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Or in other words, scientifically, you can call them grooves. Is that okay? Can you see that in the brain?
Yes.
Good. It's something you should know because it's very important in anatomy. Is that okay? Yes. It's something that is very important when we are talking about anatomy. So it's like we call them, you can call them grooves. Is that okay? You can call them grooves. Let me show it to you over here. So this one. So this one, you can call them grooves. Say grooves.
Grooves.
Good. But in anatomy, in the brain, we call them the sulcus. Say sulcus.
Sulcus.
So let me go to the diagram. So all these things. So you see where the lines, where you are seen as lines, we call them sulcus. Okay, or you can call them grooves. Grooves. Okay, so you see we have a lot of sulcus. So the sulcus are what is appearing as lines. The sulcus. And then you see the sulcus also form more like ridges, more like progression. So the sulcus is like they are forming something. Those ones we call them the gyri, or one is gyrus. So this ones. So so here, so this one for example. What is wrong with my case today? So this one for example, you see, so you see this one is also another gyrus. This is also another gyrus. This is also another gyrus. So you see there are so many gyrus. So let me go to the natural brain itself. So this ones. So you see this one, the ridges. Say ridges. Ridges. Say ridges.
Ridges.
We call them ridges. The ridges are the gyrus. The ridges. So and then the ones you are seeing as lines of demarcations, they are the sulcus. Say sulcus.
Sulcus.
Good. Sulcus. In some books, you see they will call it sulci, meaning we are looking at multiples of them. Okay, if we have a lot of them, then we call it sulci. But if you are looking at one, sulcus, say sulcus.
Sulcus.
So I can ask you that the grooves that forms the line of demarcations in the cerebrum, what is the name given to it? The answer will be what? Sulcus. But if I ask you that the ridges, if once you hear ridges, then we are talking about what? The gyrus. Say gyrus.
So
Gyrus.
So let's say I give you this, that if I point over here, what name will you call this where I'm pointing? Is it sulcus or gyrus?
Gyrus.
So gyrus.
Where I'm pointing now, is it sulcus or gyrus?
Gyrus.
It's sulcus.
Gyrus.
Where I'm pointing
No, it's
now.
gyrus. It's
Where I'm
gyrus.
pointing now, is it sulcus or gyrus?
Gyrus.
It's gyrus.
Yeah, who is there saying sulcus?
The
sulcus, the sulcus are
It's
the
a
grooves.
line.
This, the lines. This, the sulcus. This ones, the lines, the lines. We call them grooves. Okay, good. So let me. So here. These ones are what we call the sulcus. Is that okay? Where I'm pointing.
All right.
So where I'm pointing, what's the name given to where I'm pointing? Where I'm pointing now.
Sulcus.
Good, sulcus. Okay, that's sulcus. And what name is given to where I've pointed now? Where I'm pointing now?
The ridges.
Good, the ridges. So that is the gyrus. The
Gyrus.
ridges. So the ridges are the gyrus, and then the line of demarcations are the sulcus. The ridges are the gyrus. The line of demarcations are the sulcus. Okay, so please, this is some basic anatomical things about the brain that you have to know. So if I ask you that if we want to identify sulcus and gyrus in the brain, which part of the brain are you going to look at?
The cerebrum.
Good. The cerebrum. Yes. You see them mostly on the cerebrum. Is that okay? Great. And we can label it for you to name. So for example, this one we can label it. So the sulcus, for example, we can do the labeling, then you write the name. So once you see the line of demarcation, that's the sulcus. And once you see the ridges itself, so the ridges. So if you're explaining to someone, you say, okay, the grooves, the line of demarcations, we call it the grooves. And then the ridges, these ones are the ridges. So the ridges are the gyrus, and then the grooves are the sulcus. Is that okay? So note is very wrong. Okay. What is another name for the cerebrum?
Upper
Upper brain,
Tail encephalon. Say tail encephalon.
tail,
tail
tail
encephalon.
encephalon.
Good. Tail
Or
encephalon. Say tail encephalon.
tail
Tail encephalon.
Good. Or you can call it the upper brain. Say upper brain.
upper
Upper brain.
Good. So this is the upper brain. The upper brain. Okay. Good. So what we can ask you that if you are looking at the upper brain, we can ask you to mention any unique features of the upper brain. Okay. Now, if we ask you such a question, what will you write? Any unique features of the upper brain or the cerebrum?
That's where you
It
see
has sulcus and
Good.
gyrus.
It's simple. You say the sulcus and then the gyrus. Simple as that. So if we ask you, okay, if you are holding the cerebrum, if you give you a human brain, the cerebrum, and you are holding, which two unique features can you easily identify? It's simple. You see the grooves and you see the ridges. The grooves are the sulcus. The ridges are what? The gyrus. Simple as that. That's the two main features that we are going to see. But apart from that, the cerebrum is having divisions. Now, anatomically, when we give it to you, you are not going to see it divided though, but functionally, it has divisions. So we have the frontal lobe, we have the frontal lobe, we have the parietal lobe, we have the occipital lobe, and we have the temporal lobe. Okay, say it after me. Say frontal lobe. Say frontal lobe. Say,
frontal,
say parietal lobe.
parietal, occipital,
Temporal lobe.
coronal.
Are the divisions of the cerebrum, then your response would be the cerebrum is divided into lobes. So we have the frontal lobe, we have the parietal lobe, we have the occipital lobe, and then we have the temporal lobe. And all the lobes has their functions they perform. Is that okay? Uh-huh. Say it for the last time. Say frontal lobe,
Frontal,
Front,
parietal lobe,
parietal,
temporal lobe,
temporal,
temporal,
occipital lobe.
occipital,
Good, excellent. So if we ask you that, okay, what are the divisions of the cerebrum? It's simple. The cerebrum is divided into 4 lobes. Okay, what are the lobes? Frontal lobe, meaning the part in front. Parietal lobe, the part at the sides. Sorry, the part at the sides. We have the occipital lobe, the part behind, and then we have the temporal lobe. Temporal lobe is also the portions at the side. Okay, and all the lobes has their function. For example, let's look at the frontal lobe. So you see, this is the frontal lobe. This. But remember that all the lobes are part of the cerebrum. So you see, the cerebrum is divided into 4 lobes: the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe. The frontal lobe is the part that is responsible for reasoning and judgment. Okay, so when we say frontal lobe, this is the part of the cerebrum that is responsible for reasoning and judgment and also planning. So, for example, if you are planning to go and accept a proposal from someone, you are going to use your frontal lobe. If you are planning to go and cheat in exams, it's the frontal lobe you are using to do the planning. Okay? If you are planning to go and marry someone, it's the frontal lobe you are using to do the thinking. Okay, and that's why you see sometimes someone is writing exams, then they forget, they will be hitting their forehead because that's where the frontal lobe is. So it's the frontal lobe that you use in reasoning, planning, judgment. Is that okay? And if someone behaves in a way, your personality is from your frontal lobe. Okay, your personality, and that's why it's dangerous that if you have a sibling or you have a child, and you are always knocking the person on the forehead, you end up, altering their personality. Okay, because the frontal lobe, that is where it's located, in the front of the brain. Okay, and it's very important. So if you can focus on all the things that I'm talking about, so if you are going to plan any activity, you engage the frontal lobe. Okay, reasoning, judgment, your personality and your behavior, all is being controlled by your frontal lobe. Okay, and even your speech production is being controlled by what? Your frontal lobe, your speech. Is that okay? Good. So that's the frontal lobe. So for example, when it comes to how you have to plan, okay, you're planning and we have a part of the frontal lobe which is also responsible for your voluntary. For example, as you are, maybe if you are sitting, if you want to stand up, there is a part of your frontal lobe which is responsible for voluntary control. Let me show you another diagram. So I'm showing you the key features of the frontal lobe. So let me show you. So primary motor cortex. So say after me. Say primary motor cortex. Say primary motor cortex. Say primary motor cortex.
Primary
Primary
motor
motor
cortex.
cortex.
Primary motor cortex.
Primary
Primary
motor
motor
cortex.
cortex.
See the frontal lobe. You see, we are now looking at the cerebrum, and we say the cerebrum is made up of 4 lobes. Okay, the cerebrum is made up of 4 lobes. So the 4 lobes, we mentioned that we have the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the temporal lobe, and then the occipital lobe. And we are now on the frontal lobe. And we say the frontal lobe is responsible for so many things, very sensitive things, like judgment. For example, you are going to make a decision in life. For example, if you are a gentleman, a lady, you are going to make a major decision, life decision, going to accept someone's proposal, maybe going to sign a contract, going to plan an activity, a business, something. You are using your frontal lobe. It's your frontal lobe that is responsible for so many those things. If you are planning to go and marry someone's daughter, it's the frontal lobe you are going to use. Okay? If you are planning to go and accept someone's proposal, you are planning to go and do something, maybe start a business, it's the frontal lobe that is responsible for all those things. And your personality, how you judge issues. Some people, they are not fair when it comes to judgment. It means they have problem with their frontal lobe, because it's the frontal lobe responsible for those things. So if you have a friend and let's say something happened, the person's judgment is wrong, you can tell the person, oh, your frontal lobe is having a problem. Because it's the frontal lobe that is you use in doing all those things. When it comes to analyzing situations and making judgments, making decisions, planning anything, is the frontal lobe. Now, the frontal lobe too have divisions. Now, one of the divisions of the frontal lobe, you see, at the back of the frontal lobe, the last part of the frontal lobe here, we call it the primary motor cortex. And this part is very important in anatomy. This is the part that helps you to walk. So if you decide to raise your hand, it's this part of the frontal lobe that is working, the primary motor cortex. Okay? As you are sitting down, if you decide to lie down, you are using the primary motor cortex, and it's the posterior part of the frontal lobe. Okay, the anterior part of the frontal lobe, we call it prefrontal cortex. Say it after me. Say prefrontal cortex.
Prefrontal
Frontal cortex.
cortex.
Say it again. Prefrontal cortex.
Frontal cortex.
Prefrontal cortex.
Frontal cortex.
Prefrontal cortex.
Good. So this prefrontal cortex, this is the front part, and that is where when it comes to planning, judgment, personality, behavior, that is where all those things happen. Then we have the somatic motor association area, or premotor cortex. Say premotor cortex.
Premotor cortex.
Motor cortex.
Again, premotor cortex.
Premotor
Premotor cortex.
cortex. Premotor cortex.
Area, Broca's area.
Broca's
area.
Yeah, the part of the brain making you able to say it, to speak, is the Broca's area. That is the part of the brain that is responsible for speech. So, and it's part of the frontal lobe. So you see, the frontal lobe is made up of, we have the prefrontal cortex, we have the premotor cortex, we have the primary motor cortex, and we have the Broca's area. Which part of the frontal lobe is responsible for speech? Which part of the frontal lobe is responsible for voluntary activity? Good. Which part of the frontal lobe is responsible for association?
Association.
That's the premotor cortex. And which part of the frontal lobe is responsible for judgment, planning, and then
Cortex.
good.
cortex.
That's the prefrontal
Frontal
cortex.
cortex.
Is that okay? Prefrontal cortex. Okay, so you see, so all we've been discussing about is the frontal lobe. Okay, so the frontal lobe is further divided. So we have the primary motor cortex, we have the premotor cortex, we have the prefrontal cortex, and we have the Broca's area. So we can ask you that, okay, which part of the frontal lobe is responsible for production of speech? What will be your answer?
Broca's area.
The Broca's.
Good. The Broca's area. Okay, the Broca's area. Okay. So you see, let me show you one of the functions of the premotor cortex. You see how you bath, for example. How you bath. Some of you learned how to bath somewhere at the age of 5. You became a master when it comes to bathing. And as at now, nobody teach you how to bath. When you enter the bathroom, you know you are starting from your head or down. You know already. So it's because of association. You've learned it. It's registered inside your premotor cortex. That's why we call it the association area. So, for example, if you take an activity like washing, and if you are going to wash with your hands, you know how you are squeezing it. It's not something you are now going to learn anytime you are doing it. You have an association for that activity already. It's being controlled by the premotor cortex. Okay, another activity like if you are walking, you learned that long ago. It's registered in the premotor cortex. So the premotor cortex is responsible for association. For example, now that you are doing nursing, you've learned how to do vital signs. And if we should give you vital signs apparatus, you know how you are going to apply the cuff on the patient's hand. You know that activity already. It's because of your premotor cortex. It has registered that activity in the brain. So the premotor cortex is responsible for controlling like daily activities or life activities. Okay, another example, how you brush your teeth. How you brush your teeth, you don't wake up every day and learn how to brush your teeth. Once you get toothpaste and toothbrush, you know the activity already. Because that activity is registered inside your premotor cortex. Okay, that's the work of the premotor cortex. Association. Is that okay? Great. So that is basically the frontal lobe. So you see the frontal lobe is made up of what? The frontal lobe, we have the prefrontal cortex, we have the Broca's area, we have the primary motor cortex, we have the association area. Okay, good. Which one is the next lobe? We've done the frontal lobe. Which one is the next lobe?
Parietal lobe.
Good, the parietal lobe. So the parietal lobe, let's go back to our diagram. So this is the parietal lobe. So this is the parietal lobe. And it's the parietal lobe that is responsible for controlling your touch sensation, pain sensation, and temperature sensation. And right now, whichever space you are in, you see, for example, if you are in the hostel, your body is aware you are in the hostel. What is helping you to be aware of the space you are in is your parietal lobe. If you should change your location to, let's say, maybe you are descending a stairs, or you are in a lift, or you are in a vehicle, what is making you aware of the space you are in is your parietal lobe. Basically, the parietal lobe is responsible for sensation. So sensation to touch, to temperature, to pain, and spatial awareness or spatial awareness. Okay, so for example, if you wake up and you know you are in the hostel, or you wake up and you know you are at home, what is making you aware of the space you are in is your parietal lobe. Is that okay? Your parietal lobe. So if someone is at a place and the person is not aware where they are, the person is not aware I'm in a room or I'm outside, it means the person is having a problem coming from the parietal lobe. If someone, you touch the person does not feel it. Okay, or someone is having a problem, the weather is cold, the person does not feel the weather is cold, it means that there is a possibility there is a problem in the parietal lobe. So we can ask you that, okay, which part of the cerebrum is responsible for touch sensation, temperature sensation, and pain? What would be your answer?
Parietal.
The parietal lobe. Is that okay? The parietal lobe. And if he asks you which part of the brain is responsible for spatial awareness, what would be your answer?
The parietal.
The parietal lobe. Okay. Spatial awareness. So touch, temperature, pain, and spatial awareness. All of that are performed by the parietal lobe. Then we have the temporal lobe. The temporal lobe. This part is what we call the temporal lobe. Say temporal lobe. Say it after me. Say temporal lobe.
Temporal.
It's responsible for hearing, language, memory, and emotional processing. Emotional processing. Is that okay? So hearing, language, memory, and emotional processing. Is that okay? It's done by this part, the temporal lobe. Okay, so the temporal lobe is responsible for memory, understanding, hearing, as well as emotional processing. All is handled by the temporal lobe. Is that okay? The temporal lobe. Okay, good. Then we have the occipital lobe. Occipital lobe. Occipital lobe is responsible for visual processing or vision. Visual processing or vision. Okay, visual processing or vision. Okay, so we can ask you that which part of the cerebrum is responsible for visual processing? What would be your answer?
Occipital lobe.
Good. Occipital lobe. Which part of the cerebrum is responsible for touch sensation, temperature, and pain?
Parietal.
Parietal lobe. Which part of the brain is responsible for language understanding, memory, and hearing?
Temporal.
Is that okay? The temporal lobe. Okay, great. And then we have the cerebellum. The cerebellum. The cerebellum is responsible for balance, posture, and movement, smooth movement. Okay, but the cerebellum is not part of the cerebrum. Remember, it's not part. It's also a different part altogether. But that part is responsible for balance, posture, and smooth movement. Okay. Okay, so now let's do another exercise. Which part of the brain is responsible for your ability to perform some daily tasks? Learning and performing daily tasks. Come again. Is the frontal lobe, but specifically which part of the frontal lobe?
The premotor cortex.
Cortex. Sorry.
Okay, which part of the brain is responsible for voluntary activities or voluntary control? Motor cortex, which is part of the frontal lobe, the primary motor cortex. Okay, which part of the brain is responsible for your speech production?
The bronchial area.
Yes.
The The bronchi
Yes?
area.
Broadcast area.
Yes, the bronchus area. The bronchus area. Yes, the bronchus area. Okay. Which part of the brain is responsible for thinking, decision making, and judgments?
Prefrontal.
Good. The frontal lobe, but specifically.
Prefrontal cortex.
Good. The prefrontal cortex. Excellent.
That's
Yes,
it.
it's the frontal lobe, but specifically the prefrontal cortex. Is that okay? Okay. That is fine. That is fine. So basically, you see, that's the brain. So you see, we have the cerebrum. The cerebrum. What is another name for the cerebrum?
Cell and encephalon.
Cell
Encephalo.
encephalon. Cell encephalon. Okay. Mention two anatomical features or structures that we can see on the cerebrum.
You can see the circle
Don't put the crayon down.
and the ranges.
This morning. Don't put it down.
Yes, what can you see?
Circles and the ranges.
No, it's not circus and the ranges. So you are giving us the definition. The circus is correct, but the other one.
Grooves.
Good. So you have to say is the circus and
Grooves
then
and
the
the
grooves.
gyres.
Good. So the circus and then the gyri, or the saucy and the gyri, or the circus and the gyrus. Which ones are the gyrus?
The ranges.
Good. Excellent. The ranges are the gyrus. And which ones are the circus?
The grooves.
Tell me which one is there. Okay, so look at this diagram and tell me which one is the gyrus, which one is the circus. So look at this diagram. Which one is the circus? Which one is the gyri?
And the one that is forming something is the gyrus.
So the one I'm pointing is what? The area I'm pointing is there.
Yeah, that's the circle.
Okay, and the part I'm pointing now is the
ranges. Or the
good.
gyres.
So that's the gyrus, yes, or the ranges. Is that okay? Great.
Yes.
Great. So, and you can see the brain is having two hemispheres. So let's look at the hemispheres. So you see we have two hemispheres. We have the two hemisphere. So we have the two hemispheres. We have the left hemisphere. There's the left hemisphere. We have the right hemisphere. Each hemisphere of the brain has a part that it controls. So we have the left hemisphere, and then we have the right hemisphere. Okay, so the left hemisphere is responsible for perception, sequencing, rational thought, planning, math, science learning, logic, right field vision, right side motor skills. And the right hemisphere is responsible for thoughts, perception, sequencing, emotional thoughts, impulses, creativity, like writing, your art skills, imagination, left field vision, left side motor skills. Okay, so basically you just have to know here, you just have to know that the brain is divided into two hemispheres, the left hemisphere and then the right hemisphere. That is something that you have to know. Okay, that is fine. So let's go back to the brain stem. The brain stem. What forms the brain stem?
The pons, the medulla, and the mid, and then the encephalon.
Okay, so we have the diencephalon. What is another name for the diencephalon?
The interbrain.
So the diencephalon is what we call the interbrain. So the diencephalon, the midbrain, the pons, the medulla oblongata, They together form the brain stem. What is another name for the midbrain?
The
Mesencephalon.
mesencephalon.
Good. The mesencephalon. What is another name for the pons?
The
Met-
mesencephalon.
Good. The mesencephalon. And what is another name for the medulla oblongata?
The
The
myencephalon.
Good. Excellent. Excellent. This shows that you are learning. Is that okay? This shows that you are learning. Now, usually when we say this brainstem, is the brainstem that is responsible for vital activities like your heart rate. It controls your heart rate, your breathing rate, and your blood pressure. So take note. If you are looking at a part of your brain that is responsible for controlling your blood pressure, your heart rate, your breathing rate, is the brainstem. Keep it in your mind. So that's the general function of the brainstem. So that is the part that is responsible for controlling vital activities like how you breathe, your heart rate, your blood pressure. That's the brainstem. Is that okay? Good. And also, the brainstem is also responsible for controlling reflexes like your swallowing reflex, your coughing reflex, and vomiting reflex is the brainstem. Is that okay? Great. So that is something you have to know. But most of the time, when it comes to so the brainstem, under the brainstem we have the diencephalon. The diencephalon is also divided into parts. Is that okay? So under the diencephalon, let me show you another image. Under the diencephalon is also divided into subparts. So the diencephalon, we have the thalamus. Now let me show you a diagram that will show that clearly. So you see, the diencephalon is made up of the thalamus, the hypothalamus, the epithalamus, and the subthalamus. That's the diencephalon. Okay, so the diencephalon is also divided. We have the thalamus, we have the hypothalamus, and we have the epithalamus and the subthalamus. Let me show you. Okay, so here I think it's better with this diagram. So you see the diencephalon or the interbrain. So under the diencephalon, we have the thalamus, we have the hypothalamus, we have the pituitary gland, and we even have the pineal gland. All that comes under the diencephalon. Okay, so remember another name for the diencephalon is the interbrain. Okay, that simply means the diencephalon is between the cerebrum and the brain stem. That's why we call it the interbrain. And remember, the diencephalon is practically responsible for, it's like a relay structure. Okay, it's responsible for homeostasis, hormone regulation, and also your sleep regulation. You remember I told you that the diencephalon, the pineal gland is part of the diencephalon, and the pineal gland plays a role in your sleep regulation. Okay, so if we ask you functions of diencephalon, one, for hormonal control. Okay, because we have some endocrine glands there, like the hypothalamus, okay, the pituitary gland, okay, the pineal gland, all of them are part of the diencephalon. Okay, so it's the diencephalon. Diencephalon is basically responsible for your sleep control. Why? Because of the pineal gland. It's also responsible for hormonal control. Is that okay? Or hormonal activities. So you can say it's also responsible for homeostasis as an activity. Is that okay? So we can ask you a question like, okay, so when you take the diencephalon, what forms the diencephalon is the thalamus, the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and the pineal gland. So what forms the diencephalon is the thalamus, hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and the pineal gland. So practically, the diencephalon is responsible for hormonal control. Okay. What other thing? It's also responsible for your sleep
What are you rubbing on
regulation.
the mat?
Okay. Sleep regulation. Okay. Great. So basically, that is it for the diencephalon. But remember, diencephalon is also part of the brainstem. It's part. So under the brainstem, we have the midbrain, we have the pons, we have the medulla, and then the diencephalon. And I'm giving you the functions of the diencephalon. But the diencephalon too is made up of several other structures. The thalamus, the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the pineal gland. They form the diencephalon. And that is what we call the interbrain. Okay? Great. Great. So if we ask you that, okay, which part of the brain stem is responsible for hormonal control and sleep regulation, what will be your answer? Yes, what will be your answer? Which part of the brain stem is responsible for sleep regulation and hormonal control?
The diencephalon.
Cephalon. And if we ask you, okay, which part of the brain is responsible for regulating vital control, like your breathing rate, blood pressure, and heart rate? What will be your answer?
The brainstem.
It's not true. It's not diencephalon. That's a brain stem. The brain stem. Generally, when we say brain stem, it's the brain stem that is responsible for regulating vital activities like your breathing rate, your heart rate, and then your blood pressure. But when we are looking at the diencephalon, specifically, the diencephalon is responsible for hormonal control and sleep regulation. Is that okay? Okay, that is fine. That's fine. So now you know the cerebrum, you know the brainstem, and you know the cerebellum. What's the function of the cerebellum? I mentioned it. What's the function of the cerebellum?
You said it's for balancing posture and then
Good, excellent. Balancing and posture. Is that okay? Balancing and
the
posture.
smooth movement.
And smooth movements of the body. Balancing and posture, as well as smooth movements of the body. Okay, good. So balancing. So the cerebellum is responsible for balancing and posture. So now let's do this revision exercise. What are the three main parts of the brain?
The cerebrum,
And then the brainstem.
Good. The cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brain stem. So say it after me. Say the three main parts of the brain are. Say it after me. The three main parts of the brain.
Of the brain.
Cerebrum, cerebellum, cerebellum,
Cerebellum.
cerebrum,
Cerebrum.
brain stem. Okay. Then the divisions of the brain stem are.
The division of the brainstem
Diencephalon,
Diencephalon. Midbrain.
oblongata. This forms the diencephalon. Who remember? What structures forms the diencephalon?
hypothalamus, pituitary gland,
And the pineal gland.
The pineal gland. Good. So the thalamus, the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the pineal gland, they form the diencephalon or the interbrain. Is that okay? Okay. What structures forms the brain stem? Mention all the structures that forms the brain stem.
The midbrain, the pons, and the medulla.
Excellent. What is another name for the midbrain? What's another name for the midbrain?
Mesencephalon.
Mesencephalon. What's another name for the pons?
Mesencephalon.
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 Okay, what's another name for the medulla oblongata?
The myencephalon.
Myencephalon.
Encephalon.
Okay. Okay. Which part of the brain stem connects to the spinal cord?
Encephalon.
Excellent. This shows that you are concentrating. Okay. Which part of the brain is responsible for? I'll give you options, so relax. Which part of the brain is responsible for controlling your breathing rate, your respiratory rate, and then your blood pressure? A, the cerebellum. B, the brain stem. And C, frontal lobe.
The brain.
The brain stem.
Brain stem. Okay. Which part of the brain?
Oh,
Which
who's
part of
shaking?
the brain is responsible for your visual processing? Visual processing. A, occipital lobe. B, frontal lobe. And C, temporal lobe. That is fine. Occipital lobe. That is correct. Okay, which part of the brain? Which part of the brain? Which part of the brain is responsible for controlling balance, posture, and smooth movement? A, diencephalon. B, cerebellum. C, cerebrum.
Bella.
Cerebellum. The answer is cerebellum. Okay. Which is the largest portion of the brain? A, cerebrum. B, cerebellum. And C, brainstem. Cerebrum. Okay, listen to this one. Which is the largest part of the brain? A, diencephalon. B, mesencephalon. C, upper brain.
Upper brain,
Why is it upper brain?
so known as upper brain.
Yes, this shows that you are concentrating. The cerebrum is also known as that. Okay, which part of the cerebrum is responsible for speech production? A, bronchus area. B, primary motor cortex. C, premotor cortex.
Yeah.
Is responsible for association. It's responsible for association learning or association. Hey, you people are shocked. People are shocked. Premotor cortex. Premotor cortex. Okay, one of the following structures are not part of the diencephalon. One of the following structures are not part of the diencephalon. A, hypothalamus. B, thalamus. C, pituitary gland. And D, cerebral cortex.
Cerebral
cortex.
So,
because we are your children.
okay, that is fine. That is fine. Okay, so basically with this, I think we are good to go. So basically, these are the key parts of the brain that you have to know. So at least know the three major parts of the brain. So the three major parts of the brain, we have the cerebrum, we have the cerebellum, and then we have the brain stem. And know that the brain stem is further divided. We have the diencephalon, we have the pons, we have the medulla, okay, and then we have the midbrain. Know the other names for all these structures, okay, and then their functions. Is that okay? Yeah. So in fact, once you know these divisions and know the divisions of the diencephalon. So, and basically, if we ask you the functions of the diencephalon is responsible for hormonal control or hemostasis control, and also it's also responsible for your sleep regulation. Why? Because the pineal gland is part of the diencephalon, and the pineal gland is responsible for your sleep control. Is that okay? Once you know all these things, you are good to go. Is that okay? Another thing that maybe you may want to look at is what we call the amygdala. Say amygdala. Amygdala.
Amygdala.
Amygdala.
Amygdala. Say it again. Say amygdala.
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 Amygdala. We are looking at that is basically located at the medial temporal lobe. Is that okay? The middle part of the temporal lobe or the medial temporal lobe. Okay, and the function of this, the amygdala, is for emotional processing. Is that okay? Emotional processing, like fear, aggression. For example, you are in a certain area, and then suddenly you become fearful. Usually, what is at play is the amygdala. Okay, it's responsible for emotional processing. Okay, so if you are there and you feel like very soon you'll be experiencing broken hearts, it means what would activate that process of thinking is the amygdala. Okay, it's responsible for fearful processing. Is that okay? If something will happen to you and you become so fearful and worried, is the amygdala that is at play. If something will happen and you become so like aggression, you experience aggression. Okay, something will happen that will threaten you, is the amygdala that is at play. Is that okay? Yes. And the amygdala is part of the limbic system of the brain. Okay, so here is the amygdala. Here is it. Here is the amygdala. In some books, they call it the amygdaloid body. Say amygdaloid body.
Amygdaloid
Amygdaloid
body.
body.
It's the same as the amygdala. It's the same thing. In some books, they will call it amygdaloid body. In some books, they call it amygdala. It's the same word. Okay, and that part of the brain is responsible for emotional processing, like fear. Okay, something that you need emotional processing, like fear, aggression. Is that okay? Maybe you are feeling threatened. Okay, all that is being processed by emotional memory. For example, someone have done something and it has hurt you in the past. You still remember. What is keeping that threatful memory, emotional memory, is the amygdala. Is that okay? So someone have done you something in the past, you still have memories of it. It's the amygdala that is controlling all those things. Is that okay? And there are some people that they have fear for certain things. We have some people, they have fear for heights. We have some people, they have fear for darkness. You know, all those things, emotional processes, all those things are as a result of the amygdala. Okay, we have some people, they have fear for motion. If they are in maybe a vehicle, they just don't have to see that the vehicle is moving,
See,
else
I'm
they
one
start
of them.
vomiting. Yes,
I'm one of them.
all those activities are controlled by the amygdala. Okay, so emotional processing or emotional memory, okay, all those things are being controlled by the amygdala. Is that okay? Yes. So
Yes, yes.
basically, these are the parts of the brain that you have to know. Okay, and I think the last thing I'll talk about regarding the brain is what we call the blood supply or blood flow to the brain. Okay, blood flow to the brain. Now, with the blood flow to the brain, yes, so this we call it cerebral blood flow. When we say cerebral blood flow, we are looking at how blood is being supplied to the brain. Okay, so we have major blood vessels that supply blood to the brain. We have the internal carotid arteries, and then we have the vertebral arteries. Okay, so let me show you some diagrams. So you see, yes, so we have the internal carotid artery. Okay, and then we have the vertebral arteries. Okay, say it after. Say vertebral artery.
vertebral
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 artery.
artery.
arteries. We have the left vertebral artery and the right vertebral artery. They all join to form one artery. We call it the basilar artery. Say basilar artery. Say it. Say
Basilar
basilar.
Basilar arteries.
Say it again. Say basilar artery.
Basilar artery.
So the vertebral arteries, they are two. We have the left and right. They will join, then they form the basilar artery. So practically, the blood supply to the brain, we have the vertebral arteries, and then we have the carotid artery. Say internal carotid artery.
Internal carotid artery.
Carotid artery.
Artery.
Carotid artery. So we have the internal carotid artery,
Carotid artery.
and then we have the vertebral artery. So when we ask you that, okay, what arteries supply blood to the brain, you can mention that we have the internal carotid artery and we have the vertebral artery. Okay, internal carotid artery, and then we have the vertebral artery. Okay, then we have something we call in the brain, we have something we call the circle of Willis. Say circle of Willis. Say it, circle of Willis.
Circle of Willis. The circle of Willis.
Good. Say it again. Good.
The
Circle of
circle
Willis.
of Willis.
Good. Now, when we say circle of Willis, it's like a ring of blood vessels supplying blood to the brain. And the reason why we have the circle of Willis is that, you see, imagine that the brain was supplied by one artery. Just think about it that, okay, if there was just one artery going to supply blood to the brain, and imagine that artery is blocked, it means you will die. Okay, so nature is such that we have a circle of blood vessels supplying blood to the brain, so that if in case one area blocks, the other areas still supply. That is how it is. And that is what we call the circle of Willis. So with the circle of Willis, we have three arteries forming the circle of Willis. We have the anterior cerebral arteries, we have the internal carotid arteries, and we have the posterior cerebral arteries. So let's go to the diagram. So we have the anterior cerebral arteries. Say it after me. Say anterior cerebral arteries. Say anterior cerebral arteries.
Anterior cerebral arteries.
Posterior cerebral arteries.
That's one. Arteries.
And then the last one is the carotid arteries.
The carotid.
So if we ask you what blood vessels forms the circle of Willis, it's simple. There are three blood vessels forming the circle of Willis. We have the anterior cerebral arteries. Say anterior cerebral arteries.
Anterior cerebral artery.
Posterior cerebral arteries.
Posterior cerebral
Carotid arteries. Say carotid arteries.
carotid artery.
What blood vessels forms the circle of Willis? What will be your answer? What blood vessels forms the circle of Willis?
The anterior cerebral artery.
The carotid artery.
Arteries.
Excellent. Excellent. And if we ask you what's the importance of circle of Willis, so in future you go to the ward, then they ask you that, okay, what is the importance of circle of Willis in the brain? Then you tell them that, oh, circle of Willis is a cycle of blood vessels supplying blood to the brain. And the reason why we have circle of Willis is that the brain is so delicate. If it was only one artery supplying blood, if that artery is blocked, you will die. So we have three different blood vessels that forms the circle of blood supply to the brain. And that is what we call the circle of Willis. So the circle of Willis is made up of three blood vessels. We have the anterior communicating artery, we have the carotid artery, and we have the posterior. It's the same as the anterior communicating artery is the same as the anterior cerebral artery. It's the same. You can also call it the anterior communicating artery. It's the same as the anterior cerebral artery. Then we have the posterior communicating artery. You can also call it the posterior cerebral artery. Then we also have the carotid artery. Okay. Mention the two main vessels supplying blood to the brain. Mention the two main vessels supplying blood to the brain.
Internal
In
carotid arteries and vertebral
No, listen to the
arteries.
question very well. The two main vessels that supply blood to the brain. Internal carotid
Vertebral
arteries.
arteries and internal carotid arteries.
Excellent. That's 100% correct. So the internal carotid arteries and then the vertebral arteries. And when the vertebral arteries join together, what artery does it form? The two vertebral arteries, when they join together, they form what artery?
Basilar artery.
The basilar artery. Okay, good. What arteries forms the circle of Willis? Mention the three arteries that forms the circle of Willis.
The
anterior
posterior cerebral arteries,
Yeah.
anterior
The
cerebral
the the
arteries,
post.
and the carotid artery.
Excellent. Excellent. So once you've gotten this thing, it means you are good to go. Okay, so that is it for. So anytime you hear circle of Willis, it's very simple. Circle of Willis means that in the brain, because you don't want
Sir,
blood, one, yes,
sir,
ask a question. Yes, go ahead.
question.
Yes, ask your question.
Please, my research,
Uh-huh.
they gave me that
Uh-huh. Oh, who is talking? Let's hear from you. We can't see you. Hello.
She's off. Let's proceed.
Sir, please, I have a question.
Okay, go ahead and ask your question. We are listening.
please, I was asking that
Okay, go ahead.
the major arteries supplying the brain they gave
Okay.
me, it was
Mm-hmm.
6 numbers.
It was what?
It was 6 numbers.
Oh, you shouldn't be
Hey,
surprised.
sorry, it was 60 number.
You shouldn't be surprised because see, the vertebral arteries are two. We have two vertebral arteries. So the 60 number, go and check. They will write the right vertebral artery, the left vertebral artery, that is two. The bacillary artery is
No,
one. Internal carotid artery, all is two. We have the right internal carotid artery, then the left internal carotid artery. So at the end of the day, it's six. So don't be surprised if they tell you it's six. But practically it's three. The vertebral
what
arteries
you
are
what
two.
you are what you are mentioning now, Kai, is different.
What did they give you? So tell us.
They
What did they
gave
give you?
me internal carotid arteries, the vertebral arteries, the basilar artery, the interior cerebral artery, the
Oh,
middle
and you are
cerebral,
saying what we are mentioning now is different. What you are just mentioned, that is what
and
we
the
spoke about.
posterior.
Unless you just joined us. Oh. Unless you
Eh,
just joined us. Yes. Unless you just joined us. Yes. So
thank you.
which book did you
Sir,
do
please,
your
I have a
research?
question.
Which book did you do your research from?
Book.
Which book did
It's
you
not
do the
book.
research?
Oh, I was learning on YouTube.
Okay, so basically we have three arteries that takes blood to the brain. We have three. So we have
Okay.
the vertebral arteries. Here is it. So the vertebral artery is two. So this is the vertebral artery. We have
Okay.
we have the left vertebral artery, the right vertebral artery. It's taking blood. But
Okay.
the left vertebral artery, right vertebral, they will join to form the basilar. They will join and become one.
Okay.
Is that okay? They will join together and become
Yeah.
one. Then we have this artery too. We call it the internal carotid artery. That one too is two. So we have the left
Okay.
internal carotid artery, the right one, and we have the left one too here. Is that okay?
Okay.
Then
Yeah.
at the top, this internal carotid artery is the same artery is going to form the anterior communicating. So no need, and
Okay.
the basilar artery will also divide into two. Is the basilar artery this one? Is the basilar artery that will divide into two to go and form the posterior communicating. So you see the posterior communicating, we have the right posterior communicating, and we have the left posterior, but all of them is formed by the basilar. So if you go and read somewhere and they've written plenty, all is three. Just that
Okay.
they are further divided. So a book can write that, okay, the internal carotid artery, let's say, is two, but the internal carotid artery is one. You just have to know that we have one at the right side, one at the left. Do you get it?
All right.
Then the basilar, in some books, they will write the vertebral artery, the left vertebral artery, and they will write the right vertebral artery. But remember, the left vertebral artery, the right, all will join and still form the basilar artery. Is
All
that
right.
okay? Then the basilar
Yeah.
artery, as it is going, it will divide into two. So it's the basilar artery. So you see, look at this. This is, which one is this? Which artery is this? Which artery is
Please, I
this?
can't see you.
Look at the Keza. Which artery is
Kevin.
this? The one I'm pointing.
Basilar
The basilar artery. So you see, the basilar artery will divide to go and form the posterior communicating. And then it will also form. So we have the right posterior communicating, left posterior communicating. So if you go and check some books, you see some books, they can write more. Some books, they will even tell you the internal carotid artery is 2. They will write the right internal carotid artery, the left internal carotid, but all of them is still the internal carotid artery. Some books too, they will write the left vertebral artery, then they will write the right vertebral artery. Then they will come and write the basilar artery again. Okay, that's why we are saying that overall the arteries are actually 3. Okay, so we have the vertebral artery, and then we have the internal carotid artery. So we have so let me go. So overall the arteries are actually 2. The internal carotid artery and the vertebral artery. And remember, the internal carotid artery will divide to go and form the anterior communicating artery. And the anterior communicating, we have 2. We have the right anterior communicating, the left anterior communicating. Okay. Then the internal carotid artery in itself is also 2. So the internal carotid artery, we have what we call the right internal carotid artery. We have the left internal carotid artery. Then we have the vertebral artery. The vertebral artery too is also 2. We have the right vertebral artery and the left vertebral artery. Okay, so do not be surprised. In some textbooks, you go and check, they've written 6. The 6 check, you see they will have the vertebral artery. They will write the right vertebral artery, the left vertebral artery. Then they will write the right internal carotid artery, the left internal carotid artery. Then they will go and write again the internal carotid artery. They will divide it into 2. Then they will write the anterior communicating artery. Then that's the right anterior communicating artery, the left anterior communicating artery. But practically it's 2. It's 2. So look at it. Let me take you to a different. So look at it. Here is it. So you see, we have the vertebral artery. There's the vertebral artery. You see, it's 2. So you see, there's the vertebral artery. Can you see the vertebral artery is 2? So
No, sir.
So look at it carefully. Can you see? So I'm sure this diagram will let you understand it better. If you check this diagram, the diagram will let you know straight that is 2 main arteries bringing blood to the brain. So you see, can you see this big one? Can you see this big one? Look at this big one. Look at the one I'm pointing, the big one I'm pointing here. Yes. That's the internal carotid artery. That's the right one. That's what we call the right internal carotid artery. And look at this big one too. Can you see this big one too? Look at this big one. There's the left internal carotid artery. But in all, it's the same. Whether right internal carotid artery or left, it's still the same internal carotid artery. Okay. Then we have the vertebral artery. So these two down here is also the vertebral artery. So you see the vertebral artery, we have the right. Okay, the right vertebral artery. And can you see another one here too? Can you see this one?
Yes.
So good. This one is what? Is the left vertebral artery. So you check it from here. Can you see it's just 4 vessels bringing blood to the brain?
Yeah.
It's 4.
Yes. But practically it's 2 because see,
It's 2.
the internal is 1. Just that we have the right internal and left internal. Okay. Then the vertebra is also 1. Just that we have the right vertebra and then the left vertebra. Then at the end of the day, the internal carotid artery is what will go and form the anterior cerebral. So you see this internal one here. That is what has divided. It has branched. Okay, a bit branch. Now Baba be forming the anterior cerebral. So it's the same internal carotid that will branch to form the anterior cerebral artery. Okay, and again, when you come over here to the vertebral artery will join together to form the basilar artery. So there are some books that when you even go and read, they can even write 7. So they will write the vertebral artery. They will write the vertebral artery. They will even divide it into two. They will write the right vertebral artery, left vertebral artery. Then they will write again the basilar artery, forgetting that it's the vertebral arteries that joins to form the basilar artery. Okay. Then they will write the right internal carotid artery. Then they will write the left internal carotid artery. Then they'll go and write again right anterior cerebral artery, left anterior cerebral artery, forgetting that is the internal carotid artery that branches to go and form the anterior cerebral artery. Okay, so practically, if you look at it, there is two main arteries taking blood to the brain: the internal carotid artery and then the vertebral artery. Okay, so the internal carotid
Okay.
artery
Thank
and
you.
the vertebral artery. Okay, so the vertebral artery, we have two: the right vertebral artery, the left vertebral artery. Then they will join to go and form the basilar artery. Then we have the carotid arteries. They are also two: the right carotid artery, the left. Then they will go and branch to go and form the cerebral arteries. Okay, they will branch and go and form the cerebral arteries. Okay, so we have the anterior cerebral arteries and we have the posterior cerebral arteries. These are the posterior ones. So when we ask you, and this is what forms the circle of Willis. This is what is forming the circle of Willis. So the circle of Willis is formed by the anterior cerebral artery, the internal carotid artery itself, and then the posterior cerebral artery, or the posterior communicating artery. That is what forms the circle of Willis. Is that okay? Great. All right, that
Please,
is
I have,
fine. Yes, ask your question, please.
so please, with the lobes, we made mention that the temporal lobe is responsible for emotional processing. And at the
Okay.
same time, the amygdala is also responsible for emotional
Oh,
processing. So I want
then you didn't pay attention. Oh, you remember I told you that the amygdala is located at the medial part of the temporal lobe. Then you didn't pay attention. Yes, it was clear. I made it mention clear that the amygdala is located at the medial part of the temporal lobe. Is that okay?
okay.
Yes. So don't
Okay,
forget.
thank you.
So yeah. So in fact, when you get it that way, then that even enhances your understanding of the temporal lobe. Okay. The amygdala
Okay.
is positioned at the medial part of the temporal lobe. Is that okay? Yes. And you know the temporal lobe is also responsible. One of the functions is for emotional processing. Is that okay?
Yes,
Great.
yes.
So pay attention to that. So remember
Thank you.
that in terms of the location of the amygdala, it's at the medial part of the temporal lobe. Is that okay? That's the location of the amygdala.
Okay,
Okay, so I
thank you.
think we can close the chapter for nervous system. So nervous system is very interesting system. Oh. There is more, just that at your level and the nature of the semester, we can't go into so much details. There is more to the nervous system. But at least what we've learned so far with the nervous system would be very relevant to your